Welcome to the 1 Hour Guide by Anil Matthew.
Thank you. It's great to be here for this.
Yeah, so what if I told you that, the number one reason your business is failing isn't your marketing?
Right.
It isn't your product, and it certainly isn't some, new AI tool that your competitors are suddenly using.
It's definitely not the AI.
Exactly. What if the actual reason you feel so stuck or exhausted and just completely reactive is that you are, right now, today, blindly obeying the rules you were taught when you were a child?
It's a harsh reality to face.
It really is. And if you are a solopreneur out there listening to this, you already know how crazy the landscape is.
Oh, totally. Attention spans are basically zero now.
Right. And AI is just disrupting entire industries overnight. It feels like you have to be everywhere all at once just to survive.
But, survival is not mastery. Survival is this incredibly reactive state to live in.
Yeah, putting out fires all day.
Exactly. You are constantly putting out fires, chasing the next algorithm update, or just panicking about whatever new competitor popped up on your feed.
It's exhausting.
It is. And the problem with living in that reactive state is that it completely blocks you from ever building anything visionary. Like, you basically become a manager of chaos.
Rather than a creator of value.
Precisely.
And that is exactly what we are dismantling on the deep dive today. We have some truly phenomenal source material to dig into.
We really do.
We are looking at the core concepts from Robert Greene's incredibly famous book, Mastery.
Such a good book.
It is. But we aren't just, summarizing history here. We are looking at it specifically through the practical, highly actionable lens of the 1 Hour Guide by Anil Matthew.
Which is, that's such a vital framing for this.
Right.
Because Greene's original work looks at these massive historical geniuses, people like Leonardo da Vinci or Charles Darwin.
Albert Einstein.
Yeah, Einstein, Temple Grandin. It's this sweeping, epic look at human potential.
But it can feel a bit disconnected from, running a modern business.
Exactly. But what this guide does is it translates those massive historical life paths into a very concrete, action-oriented how-to guide, specifically for modern business builders.
So the mission of our deep dive today is to take you, the listener, from that exhausted, reactive founder state and give you the literal blueprint to become a visionary leader who builds a truly unstoppable business.
That's the goal.
Okay, well, I am ready for this blueprint, but before we get in the weeds, can you give us the executive summary?
Sure.
What exactly is the map we are following today? Because I know Greene argues that this isn't just a collection of random good habits, right?
Right. No, it's a very specific sequential process.
Okay.
Greene argues that mastery is not about raw, innate genetic talent.
Thank goodness.
Yeah, it's not about being struck by lightning or having some lucky break. It is a repeatable biological system, and it consists of 6 distinct phases.
6 phases. Got it.
Phase 1 is discover your calling, which is about identifying what he calls your life's task.
Okay.
Phase 2 is submit to reality, which is about designing and enduring the ideal apprenticeship.
Enduring being the key word there.
Very much so. Then phase 3 is absorb the master's power, which deals with the mentor dynamic.
Nice.
Phase 4 is see people as they are, focusing on the absolute necessity of social intelligence.
Oh, that's a big one for solopreneurs.
Massive. Then phase 5 is awaken the dimensional mind, where you enter the creative active phase and begin to actually innovate.
And the final phase.
Phase 6 is fuse the intuitive with the rational, which is the ultimate state of true mastery.
So it's sequential. You really cannot skip steps.
You cannot.
I used to think of this like building a house. You can't build a roof without pouring a foundation first.
Yeah, that's a good way to look at it.
But honestly, for a solopreneur today, it's more like trying to build a skyscraper on a swamp.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
You have all these founders out there trying to skip right to the end of success. They want the massive audience, the passive income, the industry respect.
Right, the shiny stuff.
Exactly. But they haven't driven the steel pilings down into the bedrock first. And if you try to put a 100-story skyscraper on a swamp, the whole thing just sinks the second the wind blows or the ground shifts.
The market shifts.
Yeah.
A new technology drops.
And suddenly their entire business model collapses because they didn't do the foundational work.
Exactly.
So let's start driving those pilings into the bedrock. Let's talk about phase 1, which is discover your calling, or as Greene calls it, your life's task.
This is where everything begins.
That's okay.
Before you can master a field, before you can build an empire, you have to know what you are actually meant to build.
Right.
Greene writes, and I quote, "You possess an inner force that seeks to guide you toward your life's task.
An inner force.
Yeah, he refers to this as your primal inclination.
Primal inclination. What does that actually mean?
It's that hidden force,
Yes.
that incredibly specific seed of curiosity that is entirely unique to your brain chemistry and your specific life experiences.
Okay.
And according to our source material, ignoring this primal inclination is the #1 reason why businesses fail.
Really? Number one.
Or, perhaps even worse, why they feel completely empty and soul-crushing even when they are technically making money.
Okay, I have to stop you there and push back a little on behalf of everyone listening.
Sure, go ahead.
Because the phrase, follow your calling, sounds beautiful in a book, but I have rent to pay.
Right, the practical reality.
The solopreneurs listening to this have server costs, they have mortgages, families. It is almost intoxicatingly tempting to just chase trending niches.
Oh, absolutely.
You log onto social media and you see the smart money flowing into like a specific type of B2B software or drop shipping or whatever AI trend is hot today.
Mm-hmm.
How on earth are we supposed to resist what Greene calls the false path when the pressure to just make money quickly right now is so incredibly high?
Well, it's the ultimate modern trap, and it's a completely valid fear. But this raises a really important question. What happens if you actually succeed on a false path?
You make money.
You make money, sure, but you end up trapped in a prison of your own making.
Oh, I see.
You're doing work you secretly despise every single day, which means eventually you will be outcompeted by someone who actually loves that exact same work.
Because they'll just naturally work harder at it.
Exactly. Greene outlines a few historical strategies to combat this lure, and the first is the rebellion strategy. Let's look at the mechanics of this through Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart.
Okay, Mozart, the ultimate child prodigy.
Right. But what people always forget is that his early life was entirely dictated by his father, Leopold.
Oh, really?
Yeah, Leopold was this domineering figure who intensely pushed Mozart toward the fame and stability and the financial security of being a court composer in Salzburg, working under the archbishop. That was the safe, highly lucrative, expected route.
It was like the trending B2B sauce niche of the 18th century.
Exactly. It guarantees a salary. But Mozart felt like a glorified servant.
He hated it.
He hated the rigid rules. He hated composing what he was told to compose. He realized that to access his true genius, he had to actively, painfully rebel against his own father and his primary source of income.
Wow. So he basically had to fire his biggest client.
He did. He broke away, moved to Vienna, and endured these periods of intense financial instability.
Yes, so he could write what he wanted.
Yes, so he could write the original, emotionally complex operas like The Marriage of Figaro that actually made him immortal.
That's wild.
For the modern solopreneur, you face this constantly. It might be family expectations or the lure of a safe corporate ladder you just left.
Or just shiny object syndrome dictated by what venture capitalists are currently funding.
Exactly. You have to recognize when you are building someone else's dream, and you have to actively rebel against it.
That is fascinating. So the rebellion strategy is about identifying the external voices that are drowning out your internal compass. Like if you are currently building a business just because someone on a podcast said it was highly lucrative, but you dread opening your laptop every morning.
You are on a false path.
But how do we find the right path? If we clear away all that noise, what are we actually listening for?
That brings us to the primal inclination strategy.
Okay.
Greene suggests you have to revisit your origins. You have to look back at your childhood fascinations before society told you what was quote-unquote valuable.
Right.
What were the moments of deep, unprompted absorption? What are the recurring irritations or obsessions in your life that spark a weird amount of energy?
Do we have an example of this?
We see this clearly with Albert Einstein. He wasn't initially obsessed with complex math. As a young child, he was completely mesmerized by a simple pocket compass.
Compass.
Yeah, he was obsessed with the invisible forces that made the needle move.
Oh, wow.
That primal fascination with unseen forces drove his entire life's work in physics.
I love that. But let's bring that into the business world for a second. Does the source material give a modern equivalent?
Because most of us aren't going to invent the theory of relativity.
Exactly.
It does, and it's a brilliant example. Sarah Blakely, the founder of Spank.
Yes, she's the perfect case study for this.
Look at her early career. She was selling fax machines door to door in Florida.
Which sounds miserable.
She hated it. It was a
Yeah.
false path. But she had this deeply personal, recurring, almost primal frustration with her own clothing.
Right.
She hated wearing pantyhose in the sweltering Florida heat, but she liked the control top effect it gave her.
So what did she do?
She physically cut the feet off her pantyhose. Now, millions of women probably hated pantyhose, but Blakely's specific frustration aligned with a relentless energy to solve it.
She didn't set out to chase a trending niche.
No, she didn't know anything about fashion or manufacturing. She literally cold-called hosiery mills while still working her fax machine job.
That is incredible.
That specific frustration was her primal inclination, and it built a billion-dollar empire.
It's so counterintuitive, though. We are taught to look at the total addressable market first, right? To look at the macroeconomics.
Yeah.
But Greene is saying, no, look inward first. Look at what specifically bothers you or fascinates you. Leonardo da Vinci did the exact same thing, didn't he?
He did. Da Vinci was born out of wedlock, which in his era meant he was legally barred from attending the university or entering noble professions like law or medicine.
So society viewed this as a massive disadvantage.
Huge disadvantage. But for Da Vinci, it was the ultimate freedom.
How so?
Because he wasn't forced into rigid academic textbook learning. He just followed his own obsessive, borderline bizarre curiosity.
Like what?
He wanted to know how water flowed, how birds achieve flight, how muscles attach to bone. He learned by direct observation of nature.
And that became the foundation of his genius.
Absolutely. Unparalleled genius in both art and engineering.
And when you find that weird, specific intersection of your interests, you naturally stumble into the third strategy the text mentions, which is the Darwinian strategy. This is about finding that perfect, hyper-specific niche where your unique childhood obsessions perfectly overlap with a market need. The source material mentions Yoki Matsuoka. Can we unpack her story? Because I think it perfectly illustrates how to avoid competing in crowded markets.
Yoki Matsuoka is a phenomenal modern example. She grew up as a highly competitive tennis prodigy, but her career was derailed by severe injuries.
Oh, it's tough.
It was. She eventually went into robotics, thinking she could build a robotic tennis buddy.
Okay, makes sense.
But as she studied traditional robotics, she found them incredibly clunky and rigid. They lacked the fluid, graceful movement she understood intuitively as an athlete.
Because she knew how the human body actually moves?
Exactly. So she didn't just stay in standard robotics. She began studying neuroscience to understand how the human brain actually commands muscles to move so fluidly.
Wait, so she combined them?
She did. She fused her athletic background, her knowledge of robotics, and her deep dive into neuroscience to essentially pioneer an entirely new field called neurobotics. She didn't just compete in a crowded space. She occupied a niche that felt like it was custom built for her exact, highly specific brain and life experience.
That's brilliant.
The text also mentions A.V.S. Ramachandran, the brilliant neuroscientist who followed his profound fascination with anomalies like phantom limb syndrome to create simple, revolutionary treatments like the mirror box.
They both just created their own ecosystems.
They did.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the absolute core lesson here for the solopreneur is that you have to find the intersection of your weird childhood fascinations and your current business frustrations.
Yes.
Because that is where your true market advantage lies. If you try to build a generic CRM software, you are competing against Microsoft and Salesforce and 10,000 hungry developers.
You'll get crushed.
Right. But no one can compete with you on being you. When your business aligns with your life's task, the endless hours of work don't drain you in the same way. You aren't forcing it.
Precisely. You stop fighting friction and start surfing it. You have an infinite well of intrinsic motivation to draw from.
So how do we action this? I want to give the listener a practical takeaway right now. Your lesson for phase 1 is about self-excavation. You need to spend 15 minutes today just journaling, and I mean physical pen and paper.
Always pen and paper.
Write down 3 childhood moments of pure, unadulterated fascination. Things you did for hours where you forgot to eat.
Right.
Then write down 3 current, deep frustrations you have in your industry, your daily life, or the tools you use. Look at those 2 lists. Where do they overlap?
That's the key.
Where does your natural curiosity meet a genuine problem? That intersection is a massive, flashing neon arrow pointing to your life's task.
I love that.
Your commitment this week is to run one small experiment. Maybe it's building a tiny wireframe prototype or just writing a thoughtful, contrarian LinkedIn post that honors that intersection. Master this phase and you're building on bedrock.
Which leads us perfectly into the harsh reality of phase 2. Yes, submit to reality, or the ideal apprenticeship. Because once you have that aha moment, once you have identified that life's task, moving into this next phase requires a massive and, quite frankly, painful shift in mindset.
Okay.
You have to transition from the grand, euphoric dreaming of phase one to the gritty, unglamorous reality of grinding. This is the humble, often incredibly tedious period of skill building.
And let's be entirely honest here. Modern solopreneurs naturally instinctively hate this phase.
Oh, they despise it.
We are marinated in a culture that absolutely screams at us to move fast and break things. We celebrate the overnight success.
We obsess over the 22-year-old billionaire who dropped out of college.
Or the viral product launch that made 6 figures in a weekend.
But Greene is saying that the ideal apprenticeship is actually the complete opposite of that, right?
It is the absolute opposite of the overnight success myth. It is slow. It is deliberate. It requires submitting to being a nobody for a while.
A nobody. Yeah. And Greene uses Charles Darwin as the archetype here, which is fascinating when you dig into the mechanics of what Darwin actually did.
What did he do?
Well, Darwin spent 5 years on the HMS Beagle. Now, we picture him having these constant eureka moments, discovering evolution on the beach.
Right, like an apple falling on his head.
That is not what happened. It was 5 years of meticulous, exhausting observation. It was collecting thousands of beetles, dissecting barnacles, taking endless, tedious notes.
Well, while enduring horrific seasickness, probably.
Exactly. He was submitting to the reality of the environment. And here is the kicker. He didn't rush to publish a half-baked theory of evolution the second he got off the boat.
Right. He waited decades.
He waited decades because he knew he had to internalize the reality first. He had to build an unshakable foundation of evidence.
Wow.
The same principle applies to Benjamin Franklin. Franklin took a notoriously low-paying, grueling apprenticeship in a printing shop under his older brother, James.
Oh, I've heard about this.
It was physical labor, it was abusive, and he was making almost no money. But Franklin wasn't looking at the immediate paycheck. He was looking at the access.
Access to what?
He had access to the printing press, to the layout of type, to the flow of information. He valued the irreplaceable mechanical skills he was learning over the immediate financial payoff.
And he used that exact apprenticeship to secretly write the Silence Do-Good letters, didn't he? Slipping them under the door at night.
He did, which basically taught him how to master public opinion and satire.
But again, I'm going to play devil's advocate for the listener.
Go for it.
If I'm 35 years old, I have a mortgage, I have kids, I cannot go take a literal unpaid apprenticeship at a printing press. How does a modern solopreneur apply this?
It's a crucial distinction to make. For the modern founder, an apprenticeship doesn't necessarily mean fetching coffee for someone else.
Okay.
We see this in modern tech all the time. The founders of Stripe and Airbnb lived incredibly frugally in their early days. They ate cereal for dinner and maxed out credit cards.
Yeah, the classic startup grind.
But it wasn't because they couldn't have pivoted or chased quick, small-scale funding to make their life easier. It was because they needed that deep, focused, uncompromised time to master their craft.
To understand payment gateways.
Or to literally photograph apartments themselves to understand their users' needs before they tried to scale.
I love that. Here's a way to think about it. You have to treat failure and the slow, unglamorous grind, like business tuition, you are paying for an education.
Exactly.
Think about Henry Ford. He's a titan of industry, but his first venture, the Detroit Automobile Company, was a spectacular failure.
It went bankrupt.
His second company also failed. He had repeated public humiliations, but he didn't view those early failures as a sign that his life's task was wrong.
No, he apprenticed himself to failure.
Right. He used the bankruptcies to learn exactly what not to do. He learned he needed lighter, cheaper materials and an entirely different assembly process. The failures were the curriculum.
What's fascinating here is how Greene breaks this apprenticeship phase down into 3 distinct sequential steps. You can't rush these either.
Okay, what are they?
Step 1 is deep observation, or the passive mode.
Passive mode.
This is perhaps the hardest step for an ambitious person because it requires you to completely mute your ego.
Oh, that's tough.
When you enter a new field, a new market, or even a new social media platform, you do not immediately start broadcasting your brilliant ideas. You just watch.
You observe the power dynamics.
Exactly. Who actually holds the influence? What are the unspoken, unwritten rules of this industry? What are the actual behavior of the customers?
Not what you want them to do.
Or what they say they do on surveys, but what their credit cards actually do.
Which is so hard. As entrepreneurs, we are wired to jump in and fix everything immediately. We see a broken process and we want to shout, I have the solution.
It is agonizing, but it's vital. Because if you skip to step 2 without observing the reality first, you are going to practice the wrong things.
You'll build a perfect product for a market that doesn't exist.
Exactly. Which brings us to step 2, skills acquisition, or the practice mode. This leans into that famous concept of deliberate practice, often associated with the 10,000-hour rule.
Right.
But we need to clarify what deliberate practice actually is. It is not just mindlessly repeating a task you already know how to do.
Okay.
It is highly focused, intense effort designed to hardwire new knowledge into your brain until it becomes automatic. And crucially, this requires deliberately moving toward pain and resistance.
Moving toward resistance. Okay, the source material gives some incredible examples of this, like Bill Bradley, the legendary basketball player and later U.S. Senator.
Yes.
He didn't just go to the gym and shoot the layups he was already good at. He deliberately put lead weights in his shoes to make his legs heavier.
Wow.
He taped cardboard to the bottom of his glasses so he couldn't look down at the ball while dribbling. He spent hours practicing the specific shots he hated, the ones he was terrible at.
That's deliberate practice.
Or John Keats, the poet. He didn't just write a poem and publish it. He relentlessly, painfully rewrote and destroyed his own work to force himself to find better words.
Exactly. In a modern business context, this means if you are a brilliant software developer but you are terrified of sales, your apprenticeship requires you to deliberately tackle cold outreach.
Ugh, the words.
You have to pick up the phone until you stop shaking. If you are a charismatic marketer, but you are terrible at finance, you have to force yourself to sit with spreadsheets and build financial models until your brain hurts.
You value the acquisition of the weak skill over the comfort of your strong skill.
Precisely.
And then, only after you've observed, and only after you've built the raw skills through pain, do you reach step 3, active experimentation.
Right.
This is where you gradually start to assert your own ideas, test your hypotheses against the market, and see what breaks.
Precisely. And usually you do this active experimentation while still under some form of guidance or within a safe container, which perfectly sets up the next phase.
So, how do we apply this phase 2 right now? Your practical lesson here is to identify your apprenticeship gap. What is the one critical skill in your business that you are currently avoiding because it's tedious, boring, or makes you feel incompetent? Be honest with yourself.
It's hard to look at.
Once you identify it, I want you to block out 90 minutes every single day for deep, uninterrupted, unmultitasked practice on that specific skill. Put your phone in another room, get a physical notebook, and track your daily progress.
And don't look for quick wins.
Exactly. Do not look for immediate financial ROI from this 90 minutes. Do not expect it to make you money this week. Look at it as paying your tuition to the market.
And if you can sustain that discipline, you prepare yourself for phase 3. Absorb the master's power, which is all about the mentor dynamic.
Okay.
Because here's the brutal truth. While the solitary, painful apprenticeship of phase 2 is absolutely essential, trying to do it completely alone for your entire career is a massive waste of human lifespan.
Life is simply too short.
Greene warns that wandering alone means you will spend 5 years learning a hard lesson through trial and error that someone else has already figured out and could teach you in 5 minutes. You need an accelerator.
This is a huge paradigm shift for the audience. As a solopreneur, the word solo is literally in our job title.
Right.
We pride ourselves on the I built this by myself narrative. We love being lone wolves. But phase 3 says the lone wolf dies of exhaustion.
They do.
You need to find a mentor who is 5 to 10 years ahead of you in your exact domain. You need to internalize their knowledge, their network, and their intuition, almost like alchemy.
That's a great way to put it.
The historical example the text dives into is Michael Faraday. Can we unpack how Faraday actually got his mentor?
Yeah.
He was a nobody.
He was less than a nobody.
Okay.
Michael Faraday was a poverty-stricken apprentice bookbinder in London. He had no formal scientific education, but he was obsessed with chemistry.
Okay.
So he managed to get tickets to hear the great chemist Humphrey Davy lecture. Now, Faraday didn't just sit there and listen. He took meticulous, obsessive notes. He took nearly 300 pages of notes on Davy's lectures. Then, using his skills as a bookbinder, he bound those notes into a beautiful leather book and sent them to Humphrey Davy as a gift, along with a request for a job.
That is unbelievable. He literally handed the master a monument to the master's own genius.
Exactly. And Davy was so impressed by the care, the attention to detail, and frankly, the ego boost, that when an assistant position opened up, he hired Faraday.
Wow.
Faraday then apprenticed under Davy. And he didn't just learn chemistry facts. He absorbed Davy's entire mindset. He learned how Davy set up experiments, how he thought about failure, how he intuitively approached
But
problems.
here's the massive question I know every listener is asking right now.
I can guess what it is.
I hear this all the time. I want a mentor. But how does a busy, isolated solopreneur get a high-level, incredibly busy master to actually care about them?
Yeah.
If I'm a mid-level e-commerce founder, why would the CEO of a 9-figure brand give me the time of day?
This is where the 1-Hour Guide by Anil Nathu is incredibly practical and ruthless. It explicitly states that you must create a back-and-forth dynamic by offering immense upfront value.
Upfront value.
The biggest mistake people make is sending an email saying, I love your work. Will you be my mentor? I'd love to buy you a coffee and pick your brain.
Oh, I hate pick your brain. It sounds like a zombie attack. It is a complete drain on the master's energy.
It is a terrible pitch. You are asking a busy person to do the work of figuring out how to help you.
Right.
Instead, you have to match your needs to your life's task and then find where you can serve them. Look at the relationship between the legendary boxing trainer Freddie Roach and Manny Pacquiao.
That's an interesting one. How does that fit the mentor model?
Well, Roach was already an established master trainer, but he suffered from Parkinson's disease. Pacquiao came to him as an incredibly raw, unrefined talent. Roach became the mentor, teaching Pacquiao the deep mechanics and strategy of boxing. But Pacquiao brought such explosive raw speed, such a relentless work ethic, and such specific physical attributes that training him actually forced Roach to elevate his own coaching techniques.
Wait, really?
Yes. Catching Pacquiao's punches on the mitts actually helped Roach manage his Parkinson's tremors. It was a true symbiosis.
Wow.
The apprentice brought so much fire and raw material that it elevated the master's legacy. It was a two-way street.
You have to choose a mentor according to your specific needs, too. You can't just pick someone because they are famous.
Exactly.
The text mentions Frank Lloyd Wright and Carl Jung. They both actively sought out mentors who had the exact technical knowledge they needed to advance their very specific, very unique life's tasks.
Right. Jung sought out Freud.
To understand the unconscious, even though he eventually broke away, they didn't just want a generic business coach or a life guru. They wanted masters of their specific, granular domains.
And you touched on a critical point there with Jung and Freud. Equally important to finding the mentor, Greene points out, is knowing when it's time to outgrow them and leave.
Oh, interesting.
Thomas Edison had early mentors and influences who taught him the absolute foundations of telegraphy and mechanics. He absorbed everything they had.
Mm-hmm.
But there came a pivotal point where, to truly achieve his own mastery and become the inventor of the phonograph and the light bulb, he had to break away from their shadows.
He had to stop being the apprentice and forge his own independent path.
A true mentor relationship is actually designed to eventually end, with the apprentice ideally surpassing the master.
Okay, action time. The core lesson here is value exchange. You do not get a mentor by asking. You get a mentor by giving. Your action step for phase 3 is to reach out to one potential mentor this week.
But you cannot ask for anything.
Exactly. You must make a specific value-first offer. The example given in the text is brilliant. You send a short, punchy email saying, "Hi, name. I analyzed your last 3 product launches. I noticed a bottleneck in the mobile checkout flow that is likely costing you conversions.
So specific.
I have built out 3 specific coded solutions to fix it. Here's the link. No need to reply, just wanted to help. You do the work for them, for free, to prove you are an apprentice worth their time.
That's how you stand out.
Document whatever insight or relationship you get back and immediately apply it."
If we connect this to the bigger picture, you now have a formidable foundation. You have your true calling. You have the raw skills built through painful practice, and you have the accelerated wisdom of a mentor. You are armed and ready. But phase 4 introduces the unpredictable variable that ruins more businesses than bad products, lack of funding, or market shifts combined. Other people.
Other people.
Phase 4 is see people as they are, which is the absolute mastery of social intelligence. Without this, your brilliant ideas will simply die on the vine.
And again, this hits solopreneurs hard. A lot of us became solopreneurs specifically to avoid office politics.
I hear that all the time.
We think, I'm just going to sit in my home office behind my laptop, write beautiful code, or build a great physical product, and the free market will logically reward me. I don't need to deal with water cooler gossip, corporate backstabbing, or fragile egos.
Right.
Why does Greene say this phase is so critical, even for the solo founder?
Because no matter how brilliant your product is, Eventually, your business has to collide with the rest of humanity.
True.
You have to negotiate with contractors, you have to deal with suppliers, you rely on software platforms that are run by erratic humans, you might need angel investors, and most importantly, you have to sell to customers.
They're all human.
Exactly. The core concept here is learning to read people realistically, rather than through what Greene calls naive projection.
Let's define naive projection, because I think we all do this.
Naive projection is when we assume everyone else thinks exactly like we do. We assume everyone shares our values, our logic, and our work ethic.
Right.
If we are honest and direct, we assume our partners will be honest and direct. Greene says this is a fatal flaw. Misreading people, failing to see their hidden motivations, costs entrepreneurs millions of dollars and years of stress.
It's so true.
You have to learn to navigate what he calls the 7 deadly realities of human nature. These include things like envy, conformism, rigidity, obsessiveness, and laziness.
Benjamin Franklin is such a great counterintuitive case study for this. When we think of Franklin today, we think of this suave diplomat in Paris, the guy charming the French court, the wise face on the $100 bill.
Right.
But the text points out that in his early life, he was apparently notorious for his social blunders.
He was incredibly difficult to be around.
Mm-hmm.
As a young man, Franklin was brilliant, and he knew it. He was argumentative, arrogant, and he constantly corrected people to prove how smart he was.
Sounds like a lot of tech founders I know.
He alienated potential investors, peers, and employers constantly. But Franklin had the self-awareness to realize his lack of social intelligence was destroying his business prospects.
So what did he do?
He deliberately trained himself. He formed a group called the Junto Club, and he literally drafted rules for the club that forbade direct contradiction.
Wait, really?
Yeah, he forced himself to stop saying "you are wrong" and trained himself to use softening phrases like "I conceive" or "it appears to me." He had to engineer his own social intelligence to overcome his natural ego.
That is amazing. He basically hacked his own personality. Another fascinating example from the text, and perhaps one of the most profound in the whole book, is Temple Grandin.
Yes, Temple Grandin is a legendary figure in animal sciences, but she is also on the autism spectrum.
Right.
Because of this, she didn't have an innate intuitive grasp of typical neurotypical social cues. She couldn't naturally read a room or understand passive-aggressive behavior, but she didn't let that stop her.
She developed an incredible, almost scientific, objective self-awareness.
Exactly.
She treated human interaction like a science experiment.
She did. She learned to see herself exactly as others saw her, objectively and without emotion. She knew she spoke differently. She knew she lacked eye contact. She studied human behavior like an anthropologist studying an alien species.
Wow.
This allowed her to craft the appropriate professional persona and navigate the male-dominated, incredibly rough-and-tumble cattle industry, which was initially very hostile to her. She used her visual thinking, the same thinking that allowed her to design humane slaughterhouses, to visualize and map out social interactions.
So how do we, as modern founders, navigate these deadly realities like the secret envy of a peer or the sheer rigidity of a potential client?
The guide outlines 4 clear, actionable strategies. First, speak through your work. Stop trying to win arguments with words.
Right. If someone doubts your business model, don't debate them on Twitter. Let your undeniable revenue and results do the talking.
Exactly. Second, craft the appropriate persona. You do not have to be your raw, unfiltered, vulnerable self in every single business meeting. Wear the armor the situation requires. If you need to be a ruthless negotiator, wear that mask.
Third, see yourself as others see you, like Temple Grandin. Record yourself pitching. Listen to your own tone.
And fourth, suffer fools gladly.
That last one is so important for the internet age.
It really is. Suffering fools gladly means you do not waste your finite, precious energy trying to correct every wrong person in your industry.
When a competitor copies you or someone leaves a foolish comment, you don't let it pierce your armor.
You recognize it as a display of their own envy or insecurity, and you move on.
In a practical sense for a solopreneur, this means paying intense attention to nonverbal cues. During a Zoom pitch meeting or a client call, stop looking at your slides and start looking at their micro-expressions. When a contractor suddenly starts missing deadlines and getting passive-aggressive, you don't take it personally and get emotionally drained. You step back, you recognize the underlying deadly reality, perhaps they feel underappreciated or they are envious of your growth, and you navigate around it analytically. Or even use it as fuel.
It's about turning emotional reactions into data points.
Here is your Phase 4 action step. Sometime this week, after a key interaction, maybe it's a sales call, a difficult negotiation, or even just a tense email exchange with a supplier, sit down and write out two things. One, what did their body language or their tone of voice reveal that their words didn't? Did they say yes but cross their arms and look away? Two, which of Greene's deadly realities, envy, conformism, rigidity, ego, was secretly at play in that interaction? Start analyzing human interactions like a scientist in a lab.
Which is the perfect bridge to phase 5. Awaken the dimensional mind. This is where things get truly exciting.
All good.
Because this is the transition into the creative active phase. Think about it. Up until now, everything you've done has been about mastering the existing reality.
You found your path, you submitted to the rules to learn the skills, you learned from a master, and you learned how to navigate people as they currently are.
That gives you a solid, highly functional, profitable business. But to achieve what we might call unstoppable success, to become truly legendary in your space, you have to know how to creatively destroy and break the very rules you just spent years painstakingly learning.
You have to move from mere technical skill, being just a really, really good coder or a highly efficient copywriter, to dimensional thinking, where you generate ideas that completely redefine the boundaries of your industry.
Exactly. The guide brings Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart back into the picture here, detailing his second great transformation.
Right. His first transformation, as we discussed, was rebelling against his father to find his own voice and independence.
But his second transformation was internal. He had to shift from just being a technical prodigy, a human jukebox who could play piano really fast and perfectly mimic other styles, to achieving true, groundbreaking originality. He had to synthesize everything he knew and inject his own deep dimensional emotions into the music to create masterpieces that had never been heard before.
And to do this, to awaken this dimensional mind, the text says you must cultivate what Greene refers to as negative capability.
Right.
Which honestly sounds like academic jargon.
It does, but it's a concept borrowed from the poet John Keats, and it's essential for innovation. How would you translate negative capability for the modern founder?
Okay, I have an analogy for this. Think of negative capability like driving a car in incredibly deep fog.
Okay.
Most people, when the fog rolls in, they panic. They crave certainty. They want to see 10 miles down the road so they know exactly what's coming. When they can't, they grip the steering wheel until their knuckles turn white, they stress out, or they just pull the car over and stop entirely.
They freeze.
Negative capability is the rare ability to stay completely calm, relaxed, and comfortable while driving in the fog. You accept that you don't know exactly what's 20 feet ahead, but you trust your trained reflexes to react to whatever emerges from the mist.
That's powerful.
You stay comfortable with uncertainty so you can pivot instantly, rather than locking yourself into a rigid 5-year business plan that shatters the second the market shifts.
That is a brilliant way to frame it. And it is the defining characteristic of successful startups and solopreneurs, because the market is always foggy.
Always.
The future is never clear. Look at Louis Pasteur, the famous scientist. He possessed immense negative capability. He kept an incredibly open mind to serendipity and uncertainty.
Like with the cholera vaccine, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
The famous story is his work on the chicken cholera vaccine. He didn't just rigidly test his preconceived hypotheses. His assistant accidentally left the cholera bacteria out on a bench while they went on vacation. It spoiled.
Oh, wow.
When they injected the chickens with it anyway, the chickens didn't die. They became immune. A lesser scientist would have thrown the spoiled batch away because it didn't fit the rigid plan.
Right. They'd want to follow the rules.
Pasteur saw the anomaly, stayed in the fog, and realized that was the actual breakthrough. Greene calls this spotting the fact of great yield.
You have to look for the weird anomalies in your business data. If everyone is buying your product for a completely different reason than you marketed it for, don't force them to read your marketing change the product to match the anomaly.
Exactly.
The text also brings up Paul Graham and Y Combinator, which is a legendary example for modern founders. It talks about utilizing the evolutionary hijack.
Yes.
Can we break down the mechanics of how Graham actually did this?
Absolutely. When Paul Graham started Y Combinator, he looked at the traditional venture capital model. It was rigid. VCs gave massive amounts of money, millions of dollars, to a very small number of mature companies. Graham and his partners didn't have that kind of capital. They had massive constraints, limited funds, tiny teams, and very young, inexperienced founders. Instead of seeing those constraints as weaknesses, he used dimensional thinking to execute an evolutionary hijack.
He asked, what if having no money is a feature, not a bug?
He flipped the script entirely.
He really did.
He realized that software was getting so cheap to build that startups didn't need millions to prove a concept.
Yeah.
So he hijacked the constraint. He gave tiny amounts of money, like $15,000, to dozens of startups at once. He brought them all together in batches, almost like processing software updates.
Which created a massive network effect, allowed for rapid prototyping, and completely bypassed the rigid, slow-moving, traditional VC world. He turned a profound weakness into a superpower that redefined Silicon Valley.
And then there's the incredible story of Jean-François Champollion, who decoded the Rosetta Stone. For decades, the greatest minds in Europe, including his rival Thomas Young, were trying to decipher ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs. But they were all stuck in rigid, one-dimensional thinking. They all assumed hieroglyphs were purely symbolic picture writing, that a picture of a bird just meant bird.
But Champollion used dimensional thinking. He stepped back and looked at the problem from entirely new cultural and linguistic angles.
He was fluent in Coptic, which was a descendant of the ancient Egyptian language.
Right. He looked at the Rosetta Stone, specifically the cartouches, the circled areas containing royal names like Ptolemy and Cleopatra.
And he had the breakthrough realization that the symbols weren't just pictures. They were phonetic. They represented sounds, but they also represented ideas.
It was a complex, multi-layered system. He broke the rigid rule of linguistics at the time by combining different dimensions of thought.
So how does a solopreneur practically awaken this dimensional mind? According to the 1-Hour Guide by Anil Nasu, you have to deliberately force your brain out of its rut. You have to alternate your mind.
You cannot just sit in your office staring at the exact same spreadsheets and metrics dashboards every single day and expect a breakthrough.
No, you have to create rapid, terrifying feedback loops, what Greene calls stepping into the current, by building ugly prototypes and putting them into the real world to get battered by actual customers.
And you also need to revert to primal forms of intelligence.
Right.
When you are stuck on a complex business problem, stop trying to write a mission statement or a bulleted list.
Try drawing the problem as a physical image on a whiteboard.
Exactly. Try explaining your software bottleneck using a physical analogy, like plumbing or traffic. Force your brain out of its standard, rigid, verbal processing mode and into a visual, spatial dimension.
Love that.
Your action step to awaken your dimensional mind is actually really fun, but it will feel uncomfortable. I want you to look at your specific industry. Pick one absolute, universally accepted rule that everyone follows, a rule that you yourself have deeply internalized. Now, deliberately break it this month. If the rule in your niche is to send a weekly, highly polished, text-heavy newsletter, send a one-line email with a weird, unedited audio file of you just talking through an idea.
Great.
If the rule is to offer a standard 30-day money-back guarantee, try offering a pay-me-only if you get measurable results guarantee. Break the rule, run the experiment, and meticulously document the results. See what anomaly emerges from the fog.
That deliberate, terrifying rule-breaking is what finally bridges the gap to the ultimate final destination. Phase 6. Fuse the intuitive with the rational.
True mastery.
This is the rarefied state of true mastery. After years of deliberate practice, of painfully absorbing mentor knowledge, of navigating the ugly realities of human nature and of creative, dimensional experimentation, something profound and biological happens in the brain.
Your rational, hard-earned analytical knowledge fuses with an intuitive fingertip feel.
Fingertip feel.
I love that phrase. It perfectly describes that flow state where you are making lightning-fast, highly accurate decisions. You are anticipating market trends, customer churn, or product failures before the data even exists to confirm them. But I have a very serious question about this, and I think it's the trap most entrepreneurs fall into. In the startup world, we hear a lot of people say, I'm just going with my gut.
Ah, yes.
How do we distinguish this profound, profitable intuition that Greene is talking about from a solopreneur just making a random, reckless, emotional guess because they are too lazy to look at the analytics?
It is the most critical distinction in the entire framework. True intuition is not a shortcut. Let me repeat that. True intuition is not a shortcut.
Yeah.
You absolutely cannot access Phase 6 intuition when you are still in Phase 1. The expert level of fingertip feel only arrives after you've put in the 10,000 hours of deliberate practice. It only happens after the rigorous apprenticeship.
That makes perfect sense.
True intuition is actually the brain synthesizing vast, massive amounts of deeply internalized data so quickly that it feels like a gut instinct. But it is actually highly compressed, hyperspeed, rational processing. A beginner guessing is gambling. A master relying on intuition is reading the underlying code of the matrix.
The intuition is earned through blood, sweat, and
Yep,
data.
exactly.
The source material highlights several historical figures operating with this effortless intuitive power. Marcel Proust, the novelist, he spent his entire life hyper-observing high society, attending parties, analyzing every subtle social interaction and neurosis.
Right.
He synthesized all of that lifetime data to write In Search of Lost Time, a masterpiece of intuitive human psychology.
And look at Jane Goodall. She's a phenomenal example of intuition fused with rational observation. When she went to study chimpanzees in Gombe, she lacked formal, rigid university training. The academic establishment criticized her because she didn't view the chimps as numbered, sterile test subjects. She gave them names. She allowed herself to develop a profound, empathetic, intuitive connection to her environment.
And because she used that intuition, she was able to anticipate their behavior. She observed a chimp stripping leaves off a twig to fish for termites, and she intuitively grasped the magnitude of it. She had discovered that non-humans made tools, a discovery that literally shattered the scientific definition of what it meant to be human.
We also see the absolute requirement of supreme focus, which we touched on earlier with Albert Einstein and Temple Grandin. Einstein didn't discover relativity by looking at spreadsheets of data.
Right.
He used his intuition to conduct thought experiments, like imagining what it would look like to ride alongside a beam of light. Because these masters played exclusively to their specific weird strengths, their intuitive leaps in those specific areas were completely unmatched.
Leonardo da Vinci is perhaps the ultimate example of this fusion. He had what Greene calls a life force approach. Da Vinci didn't just paint the surface of things. He literally dissected over 30 human corpses in varying states of decay. He studied the intricate mechanics of muscles, tendons, and fluid dynamics.
He internalized the tiny, rational, anatomical details so deeply, so exhaustively, that when he finally painted the Mona Lisa, his artistic intuition was flawlessly, structurally accurate underneath the paint. The rational study fueled the intuitive masterpiece.
And then there is Goethe, the ultimate universal thinker, who synthesized all forms of knowledge botany, poetry, politics, color theory to develop a widened global vision of how everything connects.
So the how-to lesson for achieving this state of true mastery for the solopreneur listening right now is threefold. 1, connect deeply to your environment. Really get your hands dirty in the trenches of your market. Talk to the angry customers. Read the support tickets yourself.
2, widen your global vision. Don't just read business books by other founders. Read biology, read ancient history, read psychology. The dimensional breakthroughs happen when you combine distinct fields.
And 3, play absolutely, ruthlessly, exclusively to your strengths.
Exactly. Stop trying to be decent at everything. Outsource the things you are weak at as soon as you can afford to, and focus all your energy on becoming transcendent at the one specific thing that aligns with your life's task.
Your final action step for Phase 6. You need to start scheduling weekly, unstructured mastery hours. This is not time for answering emails, checking Shopify analytics, or looking at Slack.
Right.
This is dedicated time to let your brain synthesize everything you've absorbed. Take a long walk without a podcast playing in your ears. Sit in a comfortable chair with a blank piece of paper and just stare at a problem.
And as you do this over the coming months, start tracking your intuitive hits versus your forced, data-heavy decisions. Write down when your gut tells you a marketing campaign will fail or a new hire is wrong, even if the data says otherwise. You will slowly start to notice that your highly trained, earned intuition is often faster and far more accurate than your spreadsheets. You are developing that true fingertip feel.
If we pull all of this together, we can really see the massive sweeping arc of the transformation we've mapped out today. We are moving from the messy, uncertain, deeply personal discovery of the calling through the grueling, unglamorous reality of practice and failure.
Leveraging the accelerated wisdom of mentors.
Navigating the treacherous pitfalls of human nature, breaking the industry rules creatively, and finally, arriving at a state of instinctive, fluid, unstoppable power.
It is a phenomenal journey, and it's one that completely redefines what it means to build a business. So let's bring it all home and finalize this how-to guide.
Okay.
If you are sitting there right now, whether you're driving at the gym or sitting at your desk, and you are ready to implement this, we have a final Entrepreneur's Mastery checklist. I want you to genuinely, brutally ask yourself these 6 questions.
Number 1. Have you clearly identified your life's task, the intersection of your childhood fascination, and your market frustration?
Number 2. Is daily, painful, deliberate practice actually scheduled on your calendar, or are you just doing what's easy?
Number 3. Do you have an active, value-based mentor relationship where you are giving more than you take?
Number 4, have you deliberately practiced social intelligence and analyzed the hidden dynamics of a human interaction this week?
Number 5, have you planned to creatively break one rigid industry rule?
And number 6, have you created the quiet, unstructured space required to notice and act on an earned intuitive insight?
As you work your way through that checklist, week by week, year by year, I want to leave you with a profound realization drawn directly from this text.
Please do.
We have a tendency today to think of modern business, startups, the internet, and AI as these entirely new, unprecedented paradigms that require new, robotic, highly optimized ways of thinking. We think we need to act like machines to win.
Right.
But the truth is, the physical brain inside your head is the exact same biological hardware that has been wired and refined over 6 million years of human evolution. It was biologically, evolutionarily designed for this exact six-phase process. True mastery isn't some modern, trendy business hack you find in a thread. It is the literal unlocking of your primal evolutionary potential. When you follow these phases, you aren't fighting human nature. You are aligning with the exact mechanism of how human greatness is fundamentally built.
That is incredibly powerful. The ultimate power Greene describes in this book is sitting right there, inside your own skull, waiting for you to use it correctly. But you have to stop chasing the overnight shortcuts. You have to embrace the slow, deliberate six-phase process.
Absolutely.
If you want to dive even deeper into these concepts and really arm yourself for the journey, the 1-Hour Guide by Anil Nathu recommends some fantastic additional reading to supplement this blueprint.
They strongly suggest checking out Malcolm Gladwell's Outliers to understand the cultural and practice-based factors of success that surround the 10,000-hour rule.
And Carol Dweck's Mindset is absolutely essential reading for surviving the brutal apprenticeship phase without giving up when you fail.
And Cal Newport's Deep Work is practically a modern operations manual for executing Phase Two's deliberate practice in our constantly distracted, notification-heavy world.
By combining all of these resources, you have a comprehensive, unshakable roadmap to stepping out of the reactive, exhausting chaos of the modern market and becoming a truly unstoppable force in your industry.
Well said.
So take a deep breath, look honestly at that checklist, and start pouring the concrete for your true foundation today. Thank you for joining us today. Visit the 1-Hour Guide website for more business insights. Let's learn and grow together.